What's up, everybody? I got July with me. We are on the first official episode of Behind the Collection with NettyWorth. It's your host, Shanice, aka Profits. Hope everyone's having a good one. All right, we're gonna jump into it. NettyWorth is the new kid on the block at the moment.
Yes.
So we're gonna jump into some really good questions. First of all, July, thank you for being here. If you could do me a favor, introduce yourself a bit. Let us know who you are, what you stand for, and why you started NettyWorth.
So quick intro on me, two-time founder, former fintech executive, originally based out of New York, ended up building the company in San Francisco and now relocating it to Miami. And what we've done is we focused on tokenizing assets and providing financial services for these assets. So anything like financing or loans, that deals with on-chain assets, our goal was to facilitate all those transactions.
So right off the bat, I mean, we're gonna get straight to it. A lot of people, I feel like, look at our industry, especially when the whole NFT boom happened, and they're like, okay, this is all made up. So in your take, first of all, are you still bullish on NFTs? And number two, how are you different compared to other companies that are similar to what you guys are building?
Yeah, so definitely, when you go back on the NFT run, we're all collectors. So I just want to clear that out. So all the co-founders, our CTO, we were all big NFT collectors, and still from art blocks to Pudgy to Yuga. And what I see in the space is I'm still bullish on those IPs. The main thing is that those IPs are very limited. So as we all know, right, we saw a ton of NFT projects launch, but very few of them have evolved, right? For instance, like what Doodles have been able to do, or Punks, or again, Pudgy and Yuga is very different compared to the rest of the industry. So I'm still bullish on, again, digital art being on chain and the communities that they're building. The difference with Web 2 versus Web 3 is that Web 2 companies have enjoyed 20, 30, 50 plus years of IP development. So when you're looking at Disney or Pixar or even Pokemon, that IP is so long and has such a deep audience that this is the reason where you're seeing collectibles on chain soaring over the past year. On that front. So I do believe, again, I'm still bullish on digital art and traditional NFTs. But the main thing is that as time goes on, more and newer IPs will be added. And I think that will ultimately help the entire industry. For us, as far as what makes NettyWorth totally different than others that are in the gacha market, is really, first of all, because we started the company as collectors in both digital and physical, we knew that going into the physical space, we needed to really focus on what made the community different. And I'm saying for the collector aspect of it. So for instance, every card that's on NettyWorth is PSA graded. That's it. Right? That's a very big deal. The second thing is all physical cards are stored in PSA's vault. So that's a partnership we have with PSA. We do the buybacks just like others, but then what starts separating us is that a user could also borrow against their card. So this is why we say you could rip, trade, and borrow. So for instance, if you pull a card and you don't love it versus the traditional apps where you're selling the card back to the companies, you could do that with us, but you could also say, hey, I really love this card and I want to take out a loan on 50% of its value. So if you rip, let's say, a $200 card, you could take out a $100 loan, pay it over 7, 15, or 30 days. That's the lending aspect in DeFi that we've brought into the space that I think is going to fuel more growth, because there's more liquidity now. And as liquidity is transferring, this allows the market to continue to grow. And then there's other aspects too, like where we're doing on-chain financing and the ability to trade with others and the way our marketplace is working and auctions, etc. So there are, multiple differences between us and others. But I would say to highlight the biggest things is PSA only graded slabs. Every physical asset is stored in PSA, and then you have the ability to borrow or finance against these assets. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that separates us.
Well said. I feel like, especially as a collector myself, a lot of us are very much so like emotionally attached to our grails, right? Now, I'll say personal experience, and I talk about this all the time, DeFi literally changed my entire life when it became a thing, right? In like 2016, 2017, where as a trader, we like having access to extra liquidity that we may not have. So I feel like when some people hear that, they're like, whoa, I don't want to give up. So for those that are comfortable with, for example, full disclaimer, I'm not recommending anybody take any loans or borrow against anything if you're not responsible, right?
Yeah.
But for those that are and have, liquidity within their collection, does NettyWorth let them unlock cash without giving up the asset? What is the exact step-by-step process for somebody that has a collection worth a few $1,000s or even, six figures, and they say, hey, you know what, I would love to borrow against this, but at the same time, I want to make sure that my collection is safe?
Yeah, so I would say to start with, one of the key benefits of taking out a loan using DeFi or using NettyWorth against your cards is that it doesn't affect your credit if you aren't able to pay back the loan, and we don't do any type of credit check. So all it is we take 50% of the asset value and we provide, and you have access to that liquidity for a loan. So again, if you have a $1,000 card, you could take out a $500 loan and pay it over a month, let's say. To break down the process, so there's a few things. Number one, you could rip a pack on NettyWorth and instantly decide if you want to borrow 50% of the value of that card. That's one. Number two, maybe that card, you ripped it maybe a month ago and you need access to more capital, either to do new rips, to buy new cards, or you want to do something else with the capital. You could always come back to NettyWorth and take out a loan on that card. For the user that has, let's say, a collection of $5, $10, $15, $20,000, what they could do is they could contact NettyWorth. They could store their cards within NettyWorth and PSA, and that means is we're gonna vault that your collection, and then based on the card ladder's value, you're gonna be able to borrow 50% of the actual card. And from a tech perspective, this is what happens. When you take out a loan on NettyWorth, your card basically is held in escrow and you receive the funds. And you have two options. Either you pay back that loan and you receive your card back, or you default and the card actually could either be purchased by NettyWorth or go into auction. So again, the main thing here with DeFi and Web3 is that when a user borrows, first of all, they don't need to know any of the jargon, right? But the simplicity of borrowing against your assets and getting access to capital is really where the magic happens. And again, the main thing is this does not affect your Web2 credit because there's no credit check or no reports on like whether you defaulted or repaid the loan.
So when it comes to, like, before I go into the next, I think, nitty gritty of the platform, I think the number one red flag, being a part of all the fun and everything that's been happening within this arena the last 3 or 4 years, is the, how do I say this? Because I'm on the podcast right now. So Twitter, right? We're on X and we have all of our Web3 camaraderies and our peers. And a lot of people love to use the word, the first ever fill in bullshit, right? Or the first ever. And, or like kind of take the jargon or the terms and kind of like, it's like they'll add more to it than what it really is. And so, for example, trust. There's like no shot. I don't care how much company you're making, revenue you're making, that I'm gonna just buy off or even store my cards with a lot of these
other
companies,
gotcha machines.
right?
Yeah.
So tell me, why would somebody trust NettyWorth? Number one. Number two, what is the like how long has the vault that that NettyWorth is using been active, and why is it so secure?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is right, almost like taking a step back. We're VC backed and we're like fully public, right? So we're all doxed, and we're actually really known in like some of the niche communities in the Web3 space itself.
So nobody's garage, right, July?
No,
Nobody's garage.
no. So we're all public and all that. So I think that's one step, understanding that there's institutional capital that invested in our company, and we're publicly visible, and the founders, everyone could access us, they could write to us and all that. That's one side of the thing. The second is your trust is in our partnership with PSA, because again, we're not storing any of the cards, right? And right, like we've heard rumors and all this other thing that people have their own storage facility and all that stuff, and I don't know how they're managing inventory and all that. Everything with us is through PSA, right? Which is vaulted in PSA. It's in Delaware. It's fully insured and secured. So that's where the real trust is like, okay, I know NettyWorth is a VC-backed company, and I know that their partnership with PSA, and PSA, I mean, it's hundreds of millions of dollars that they have in cards stored. So I think those elements is where someone could say, okay, I trust them because of this partnership and because of the folks that have backed and invested in this company.
Like as far as like being, obviously there's a lot of, like I said, companies out there, and NettyWorth is newer. What is one of the coolest features? One of the coolest features is being able to rip packs using borrow funds. Walk us through how that actually works and why collectors would be excited about it. And if I may add real quick, I feel like a lot of times people can't get access to retail, and so they'll go to said card shop in their neighborhood and go pay 2-3x, not even caring. Their kid wants it, they want it. So I feel like the rip aspect for real collectors is exciting, because they're like, oh shit, I have a chance to get a high value card, opposed to looking for the God pack, looking for this, and then paying 3x of a retail
not
box
getting anything.
anyway. So, but please walk us through like that process when you're getting on NettyWorth.
Yeah. So you could create an account by simply just putting in your email address. You could select what pack you want to purchase. You could view the odds of what you could potentially win. And once you open up your first pack, it's one card per pack. You'll have the ability to either sell it back to us for up to 90% buyback, keep the card and ship it to you, right? You could ship it to yourself on there, or you could go ahead and borrow against the actual card. I think also like when you're looking at like why this is important, because I'm a collector myself, and I mostly buy like single slabs, right? And for me to buy a box that's, let's call it $300-$500,
right?
And then maybe I'll get a card, and then
big maybe,
big maybe, and then I have to get that card and ship it to PSA.
6 months, 7 months,
right? 3 to 6 months, right? And then
to try to pop the most value out of the card.
Yeah, and then not understanding that as brand new as a box you got and as new as the card is, the way they actually printed the card is actually a big part of your PSA grade. So you could get a brand new box. It's a brand new card. It just came out 2026, and you could send it to PSA. You could wait 6 months, and you could find out that you got a PSA 8 or a 9, right? So that
you broke even in 6 months, 7 months later.
Yeah, if that. So I think like this idea that you're going into a system or a platform like ours and guaranteeing that every card is PSA graded. And most of our grades, I would say, are going to be from 7 to 10. I think it's a big deal because a lot of these cards, I'll give you an example. there was one user like 2 months ago that said, a month ago that said, hey, I paid $50. I ripped the $40 card, but the card is now worth $70.
Now it is
right.
Wow.
So like, from a small example of like, they got something of value.
For
it
sure.
was still a PSA 10 card that they got, even though it was lower valued. Over time, it was worth holding on to versus having, buying all these boxes and having all these singles that are not graded and they're just collecting
and
dust.
you're never going to go drop them off.
You're
or
never
any of
gonna-
that.
yeah.
You don't care to do it. Like, whereas on the platform, you get access to liquidity right away.
Yeah.
When it comes to like problem solving, what do you think one big problem NettyWorth is solving that nobody else is solving well? And you can be as honest as you want.
Yeah, I think the space has done a very good job improving the UX, UI. I think we're adding to that. And it's a small, minor thing, but I do think that ultimately for the consumer, it's a better experience. With that, I really believe like the thing that's separating us is that, 3 years ago when I was building this company, that our focus was on tokenized assets and providing financial services for those assets. And I think that's really the biggest thing that separates us because we're not using a third party solution. All our entire financial, let's call it dev stack is in NettyWorth. Like we own it, we control it on there. And, there's a lot of things like removing a peer-to-peer model, going with a peer-to-pool model, which improves, removes the friction. And the only reason we knew that is because we were in the space again 3 years ago. So what that means is that when you want a loan, you don't have to request a loan. You could just go and take it from the liquidity pool. But I think really it's the financial services that we're super excited about that separates us again, because you have the ability to take out a loan. You have the ability to become a lender. You have the ability to finance assets on chain by leaving a 50% deposit on the asset. You also have the ability to make trade with others and adding currency to that. So for instance, if I wanted to trade, these 2 cards for your 1 card that's more valuable, I could say, okay, I'll do these 2 cards plus, $2,000, in USDC for your card. And I think that's the cool part of,
That's actually dope.
yeah, where we're adding ways to trade and exchange these assets through financial solutions.
Well said. Very well said. When it comes to, the build and everything that NettyWorth is aiming towards right now, fast forward 3 years, how do you think borrowing against collectibles changes the hobby, if any changes you think will be made?
Yeah, I think it's gonna pump more liquidity into the space.
Agreed.
And we're very bullish on collectibles and all sorts of RWA, real world assets. So there's watches, there's collectible cards, there's Legos. What I'm a big fan of.
You see jewelry coming into this eventually?
I see it.
Or I shouldn't say jewelry, luxury watches.
Yeah, luxury watches for sure, because all the luxury watches is ultimately a collectible, right? And it has value. So I think again, bringing the RWA into this space is really what I see where the future is going. TCG was just one small example of what the market was so hungry for.
Isn't that funny? I'm gonna talk my shit. Literally 3 years ago on crypto Twitter, everybody was talking about prediction markets or the next coin or the next NFT project or fill in some bullshit blockchain. But now they're all TCG and Pokemon experts. GG's. I told you so. Thank me later.
Yes.
All right. So let me get my questions up. So if every collector understood one thing about NettyWorth, what do you think it would be?
I think the biggest thing is understanding that we're collectors. And that's very different than getting in the space because you could make some money. And again, my personal collection, they're all PSA graded cards.
Yeah.
I collect watches, I collect art. So a lot of the things that we're seeing where this space is going to evolve, we actually have tremendous amount of knowledge in. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is like, you could trust us. We're collectors for collectors, and we're going to continuously build financial solutions for these assets.
I feel like for beginner collectors, a lot of friends, ask me, and I always say, try to go to your Target, try to go here. So for a beginner collector that, has the $50 or whatever it is, they want to start ripping on the platform, what would you say their best advice it would be? Like, what best advice would you give to somebody that, they got a little bit of money, they want to start their collection, they want to start even potentially borrowing against the collection once they start to build it up? But what would you kind of advise them on, if any advice, when it comes to using NettyWorth?
Yeah, I feel like first of all, I think we all see like, all the headlines of like, this card is worth 50,000, 100,000, right, $1 million. I think the biggest thing is you could start collecting with as little as $50, and I wouldn't just look at the hobby based on like these high numbers, like, hey, I don't have $10,000, so I'm not going to get into it.
Right.
Actually, like, that's my biggest thing is like, get into it. You could start with even $50 or even less if you want to rip like a physical pack, etc. And then what I would, this is something I've done as a child, is like really collect things that you're like super passionate about. And whether it's a character or whether it's an athlete, I think that's very important to like double down on the folks that you like or that resonates with you. So, as an example, like I'm a big Michael Jordan and Ken Griffey and Ohtani collector. And just about maybe 2 months ago, I picked up another Jordan card, and the card was only like $400, right? So it wasn't this $1 million card. And today the value is $1,200. But that was like one of my lowest, inexpensive cards. And for me, on that side of things. But it just shows like I went somewhere, I picked it up because I really liked the card, regardless of the price. But it was a PSA 10, and now it's worth, 3 times the price. So I think really collect the things you like. For Disney, I'm a big fan of Wally. I would love to collect a ton of Wally things. I have a PSA 10 Steve Jobs card, right? And it's because I love Steve Jobs, right? Topps actually made like an edition of like CEOs or like impactful humans on Earth at the time. And so I started, I collected that. And I wasn't looking at it from like, oh, if I bought this card, it's going to set, 10x or whatever. It's just like, oh, this is pretty cool. And there's only like 20 people that have this.
Yeah.
So naturally, things that are rare are just going to become more valuable in the world.
Yeah, no, love the way you said that. So before I get into the last couple of questions here, I think in our space overall, Web3, crypto, it's obviously evolved quite a bit, right? I remember like years ago, ICO, boom. We were buying things that were never, ever going to come out ever. It was just air. We were just buying air. But now things actually work. The tech works. So from an infra perspective, and I think you explained this very well, so I'm excited to get into this. There's a lot of companies that like which we use some third-party stuff, which is kind of needed. However, when it comes to infrastructure, fees, accumulation over time, and from an even higher perspective, like the longevity of a company, could you explain a bit why it's I don't know if the best word is better, but why I feel like NettyWorth's in the lead in this because the infra is you guys own it, right?
Yeah.
So can you explain that a bit, especially from a fee perspective and then competitive perspective? Because at one point, the companies that are using third parties, they're not obviously eating all the fees. They're having to pay some. And whereas NettyWorth doesn't have to necessarily do that. Yeah,
because we own all the tech. What happens is companies that are doing things that are similar to ours, they're traditionally paying like, let's say 15 to 25% to use maybe a third-party solution to maybe do the gotchas or anything like that. The other part is when a loan defaults, NettyWorth has the first right to buy that loan. right? And if someone defaults, we're buying the loan at about 50% of its value.
Okay.
Right. And basically that ends up either going in our balance sheet as an asset at that price, or we could use it under the gotchas or anything like that. If we choose not to sell, not to buy it, it'll go into auction in our marketplace. But I think once you understand like that, we're not paying these third-party fees, and we're also having the ability to acquire defaulted cards
Right.
or collectibles. That increases our margins, which means it's going to be harder and harder for other companies to compete against us. And obviously, one of the things that we've had discussions about was, does NettyWorth eventually release a token? And we've actually put in a lot of work, a lot of thought into this. We do have a tokenomics model out there and all that. But one of the things that could eventually benefit the token model is the margins that we have that separates us from all other companies.
So I have a collector question. If someone owns cards or collectibles but has never considered borrowing against them, what's the one thing you want them to understand before logging off the video? And FYI, disclaimer again, we're not here to encourage that by any means. It's more or less to emphasize a service that NettyWorth does provide. But yeah, if you had something to say to those that maybe have a high value collection but have never considered borrowing against them.
Yeah, I think it's really about if you know that there's an opportunity out there and you could get access to capital without using a credit card or without taking out a personal loan.
There's
that could affect
literally
you.
no loss.
Yeah.
Unless you become irresponsible with the capital.
And don't pay back your loan, right? But I think the biggest thing is number one, do you see a clear opportunity that you could use the funds to either make more or improve on a trade or on an asset? Or do you want to access the funds to collect more, right? That's the biggest thing that I feel like that's the opportunity. So you might see a card in our marketplace where you're like, I could pay this, over the course of a month, let me finance it, or let me borrow against my card so I could go ahead and buy that card, right? Because both models work similar to each other. So I think it's that. It's like if you have the opportunity to either add to your collection or an opportunity where something is just right in front of you and you need access to capital, well, how could you access that capital without going through the traditional Web2 world?
I think for collectors that maybe have never done it before, I think the attachment and all the things are just what's scary. But if you think about it, a lot of times people go to a pawn shop and then first of all, get way less than 50%, let's be honest.
Yes.
Give you $5 for something that's worth $5,000. But then also making sure that okay, I'm getting this much value. I can take this, I can reinvest it, or I can, buy a different collection or buy another card, flip it.
Yeah. By the way, we've seen folks take out a loan on a $250 card. They got $125. They rip a $50 pack and then win a $200 card. Right? So it's folks are using it for sure.
So legacy question, and we'll wrap up right after this. We'll have one more question. We'll wrap up. If we sat down 5 years from now, what would have to happen for you to say NettyWorth changed the collectibles industry?
I think for me personally, it would have to be that users and collectors of all sorts of different assets are using financial services for these collections. So I think it has to go beyond TCG and sport cards and into other RWAs. And I think if we were to do that over the next 5 years, I think the impact will be, it will satisfy my appetite of like what we were here for.
Okay, great. All right, last question. Finish the sentence. All right?
Yeah.
The future of collecting isn't just about owning assets. It's about
tokenizing them.
Bang! Bang!
Yes.
All right, so thank you, July. That was amazing.
Yes,
that was
thank you.
So well done. And this is the first official episode of Behind the Collection by NettyWorth. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.